army can't stop that creature.
No, but maybe we turtles can, with a little rocket power.
Someone keeps eating my yogurt.
What kind of yogurt?
I was saving that for after my run, David.
Oh my god, I guess I was saving it for during your run then.
Hey, Robbie, we're not going to bust her chops for trying to impress a girl.
I can't believe she's dead.
It's the Al Travis Show, and I'm very excited to have our next guest on because she might as well be in the news, for heaven's sake. She's going to have all the answers. She's Senator Heather Gustafson. Senator, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's interesting to me as I read all the stories, and I'll give a little run up to my question for you, but it always comes back to I got to ask Senator Gustafson about this.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew going in last session when you and I don't know who all got on it, but you started this Office of Inspector General. You wanted it to be free and clear of any, it didn't have any hierarchy. You're going to be this independent thing. And you and I've talked, I love the idea. It's a brilliant idea. It needs to be happening. And now, let's say it's almost a year later, every news story somehow ends up coming back to me and saying, Senator Gustafson, are you not right? You're right 100%. Here's my deal. So the governor is on Tom Hauser's show 2 weeks ago. And Tom says, you going to be any more fraud and stuff? And the governor with this oh, golly gee thing, well, probably, these guys are professionals. They're like the mafia. And then 3 days later, they cut off or suspend like 14 programs and say, we're going to go look at all the payments because we think there's fraud going on here. And my first thought was, wow, in 3 days we went from possibly to 14 of them, and he had no idea. He's the governor. He had to. Well, then we find out he's hired Optum, and this is nothing against Optum. I don't know them from Adam. They might be the greatest people to do this of all time. But the story comes out, they put out a request to have someone go through all this, sent it to 4 companies, 3 came back, and I don't know if Optum was the best price. Anyway, they picked Optum. But it goes in my head, well, wait a minute. From the day he told Tom there might be some, to 4 days later when they stopped it all, and he had time to get 4 companies to put proposals. The guy knew all along this was coming, and I don't mean to call him a liar, but come on. And now he does it, and this Optum gets $2.3 million, and this is where Senator Gustafson comes in. Didn't you, we're going to spend time talking, didn't you offer an Office of Inspector General whose job would be to look at this stuff?
Yeah.
And
yes.
I want to say, and I don't remember, it was like $2-3 million to start, and then all of a sudden all this other stuff came in, and it was like, now it's $7 million, and it's too expensive.
Yeah. It's less than $9 million for 2 years, which is
$4 million a year. Okay.
Well, yeah. Yes, about $4.5 million a year. Mm-hmm.
Okay, but explain to me how that gets to that number, because I'm not a smart man. We have inspectors generally, like one under Human Services. We have them, but they're all underneath different umbrellas, right? Don't we already have some, like 4 of them?
We have 2. So we have one in DHS, and we have one in the education.
Okay, so we have 2 already, and I don't know which one would become crowned the prince of all, but that one moves up, and everybody now they're freed of having to report to one person. That's how I understood it. So how does that become millions upon millions of dollars? You got to put a new name plaque out. You got to change their office placard, but how does it get to millions of dollars when we already have said people they get a raise?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, this is the federal government. They have a regulation, a law that says every single state has to have their own internal IG that deals with Medicaid funds. So every DHS in every state has to have either their own auditor or their own inspector general. So we can't get away from that. That's a federal rule. But the education one would essentially be absorbed into the new office. The reason why the new office would cost, there is some startup cost. You're going to have to involve Minute and all of the, just the technology and the logistics of setting up a new office. However, there's also probably roughly around 35, 36 employees. And that's even on the light side. If you look at the OLA, which a lot of what we did is modeled after the OLA, even though they have very different jobs, but the OLA takes in thousands of tips a day. Thousands at least a week, right? And so in order to triage those and go through which is which and what is what, you're going to have a significant staff. Now, that's still on the low end, but we also wanted to be, effective, fiscally responsible in a year where we're watching all of our budget dollars. I do think it is worth the investment, considering it'll help us prevent losing money, though. So
Okay,
that's
so the governor, and if 4.5, or just 1 year at a time, 4.5 is just way too much. We can't have this. That's too much money for a $72 billion budget, by the way. That's
Right.
too much money. He just wrote a check for 2.3 to check out this finite set right here. Just that. You look at this. That's half the cost. It's gone. How is that an efficient use of my money?
Yeah, I mean,
And I don't want to get you in trouble with the governor. I know you're on the same side, but am I looking at this wrong? Does that make any financial sense whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I put my district before I put any of my party affiliations. So I will say that I share your frustration.
Okay.
And I think that fraud is one of those things where if you don't put in the time and the resources on the proactive side, you're going to see a problem. And that means that when you see something like a Feeding Our Future, you need to put things in place after that. We should only have one. We should never have any of those, right? But if we do have one, so many lessons should be learned. And I felt like as a new senator, when I came into this, I asked a lot of questions. I expected to hear certain answers, and I didn't hear those. And therefore, I introduced the Office of Inspector General. So I think you're right to be frustrated. I am as well. Lots of things to be considered.
Well, there are, and here's some of it. One of these stories out last week or since last time you're here, some company, and I'm not going to remember the name, pretty well known for giving and being there, their CEO had been tied up and was in violation of the law. He's being sued or in court for fraud. But we continue to send money to the company, and it's like, I'm not a smart man, you know that. Yeah. I would say the easiest law we could pass is if you're under indictment for fraud in the government, you can't get a check in any of the other services until you clear your name. Now, we'll pay you back if you end up telling me you didn't do anything wrong. But is that so weird that I should suspect if you were in Feeding Our Futures, you're not getting any checks anywhere else? That seems like a no-brainer.
So here's where it gets tricky, because I agree with you, and common sense agrees with you. I think all of the regular people like us are like, what is going on? But I will say that it operates differently in a government than it does in a corporate America, or even how I would handle my own kids and my own family, right? The reason why is because the legislature puts forward a budget, right? And we say this money goes here and this money goes here. The executive branch constitutionally there's a little bit of a problem if they're going to be able to just shut off money that has already been passed and approved by the legislature. So now you're just talking about, just that's the issue there, right?
I get that.
Funds that the legislature has said is supposed to go to this. Now, to be fair, the legislature meant for those funds to go where they were supposed to go. They weren't meant to be swindled or taken or stolen from us.
See, but that's kind of like the governor now putting a pause on those 14 things, right? He's not saying he's not going to pay them, but we're going to look. We're going to make sure that the hood's good, and then we'll pay you back. If he can do that for this, then there is no reason for any of these others. If you're under indictment, we're pausing all your other stuff. We're going to find out. And that, to me, is common sense. It puts more pressure on the governor's office. You guys allocate it, and then he's got to manage it. Yeah. But that brings us to the next step. So you talk about like OLAs. I mean, you talk about what happened with Feeding Our Futures. The OLA, this guy comes on. We did talk about this, Knowles, two weeks ago or whatever, and wrote a letter, said I was the OLA. And I'd come up with our stuff. We'd look into it. We'd come up with our answers. And we were literally shut down at the committee level saying, we're not going to talk about that here. Mm-hmm. Well, we're kind of in the same spot with the governor now. I don't know if you caught this. And again, I'm not trying to rip the governor, but it kind of showing the pattern here. The governor's office, the OLA, and I don't know who sticks the OLA on the governor. I don't know how that happens. Okay. Yeah. But they did a report on him and the lieutenant governor, and they came up with 12 places that they aren't doing things cool. Now, they didn't say they did anything illegal. We're not saying it's fraud, but it sets it up. And it has to do with receipts to cover for whatever you're getting paid back for. It's just really sloppy. Well, that story kind of died right there. I want to know what those 12 counts are. I want to look into it. And not that I want to jump on the governor, but is it the same sort of weird crap we're getting with all the committees, all the other, human services and all the rest of this stuff? Does it really start at the top, which we're not, shouldn't we look into this more? And that's why you need the inspector general who doesn't have a boss. Sorry,
Yeah,
I keep coming
right.
back to Heather, Senator Gustafson. This is exactly why. And I'm not. They said he did nothing wrong. I'm not saying that, but you're the seventh year in as governor. You must know how to do the receipts and how to pay people and do time off. I mean, by now we'd know.
Right. I get it. It's just another level of frustration. I understand that. I will say this is an example of where the OIG and the OLA would be different. The OLA is in charge of doing what they just did, right? So they're auditing books and going through that.
Yeah.
The OIG would not be investigating the governor.
No.
I mean, unless something really crazy was going on. But
Came
by then,
out.
I think, the press would know, right? So that is not what the OIG does. But to your point earlier, the OIG does look at vendors and recipients. That is what one of the things that distinguishes them from the OLA. And so there are these, situations where you see something in the news. And my first thought is always, how would an OIG handle that? Sometimes it wouldn't be an OIG's job. Sometimes it's not a legislator's job. Sometimes it really is an internal thing. And sometimes it's not. And I think the problem is that we're seeing too many examples coming from us in different places. Yeah. And all of it amounts to the fact that we are tired of our taxpayer dollars being stolen from us.
I love you. I really do. I think the rest of us out here, maybe because I watch it every day, maybe everybody doesn't, but we get so lost in the next one. There's an Enga gal I want to talk about on the other side of the break who didn't realize she was getting services from some company. Somebody auditors, hey, I know what you're talking about. I think we're so tired of trying to keep up with which ones is that and which ones, that's under this and that. I don't want anymore. I want very much to trust that the money we send in is being spent wisely and not walking out the back door. And I think you're the only hope. On the other side, we'll start with this, and I'm going to try to remember, I'll write it down. Senator Heather Gustafson, can you get that passed now next year in the next legislative session? Because, oh my God, if you can't do it now, with all the things we've seen, it may never get done. We'll talk about that on the other side. Is that fine? Senator Heather Gustafson on the Al Travis Show.
Tired of one-sided media and divisive noise drowning out your conservative values? Take back the conversation with Braver Angels. Join a grassroots movement to restore civility and find common ground without compromising your principles. As a conservative, your voice matters. Share your perspective on issues like immigration and public health in Red Blue workshops and help rebuild trust in our great nation. Be a leader in depolarizing America. Sign up for free at mn.braverangels.org. Braver Angels, where conservatives, liberals, and independents unite for a stronger republic.
You know that car sound that sounds like a cricket playing a banjo? Jays can fix that. You know when you step on the brakes and your car sounds like a pair of tennis shoes in the dryer? Paul is the guy who specializes in that. And you know that sound that never happens when the mechanic's around? Paul took a whole course on that. If you own a car, you need to know Paul. Paul owns Jay's Auto Shop, 202 North Main Street, Blue Earth, 525-1052, 525-1052.
best friends, the Al Travis Show. Nothing but talk.
I always say it. I got the best guest in, and mark this down today. Senator Heather Gustafson. You heard her on the Al Travis Show. If she can get this piece of legislation passed, that good God, I hope she does. This will change Minnesota for the good in more ways than we'll ever be able to count. Office of Inspector General, with all the things we talk about on the show week after week. Oh my God. Can you get this passed, Heather? Is there enough push now? Even Senator Rest, sorry, she came out and said, hey, this can't keep going on. Is there enough for you to get this over the finish line in the next session?
I think so. I think there's some renewed interest in it. I know Senator Kroon and I spent a lot of time over the summer taking lots of opportunities to make sure it stayed relevant. I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of examples that we could point to about why it's needed and why it's relevant. And so I do think there is a renewed interest. So I am cautiously optimistic. It is, every time I see a headline, it is frustrating. It has been 187 days since the Minnesota Senate passed the most substantial and significant anti-fraud bill in Minnesota state history. And we are now just waiting in the House and to get the work done to make sure that it can get passed. So,
all right, fair enough. Here's another one. Here's the Al Travis way of helping out. And this is, I'm not calling for it now, but I might. Everybody get ready. So this gal, Erna Hammerschmidt, which, by the way, sounds like a made-up name, and I think that's how she, Erna Hammerschmidt. So you're sitting there, you're doing some background check, Medicare background billing check, and they see this name, it's like, oh, someone made that up. Let's call her. And they called her. And they find out this company had been billing $188.90 multiple times a week for helping her with something called the Adult Rehabilitative Mental Health Services. Erna's like, what in the hell are you talking about? I don't know. I never met these people. What are you talking about? It was all made up. The company's already said, yeah, we found the guy who did that. We let him go. Well, that's crap. It's no guy making $10 an hour is trying to scam so that the company can do better. It's all, anyway, makes no never mind to me. I'm to the point now, so Erna doesn't even have a clue she's being used. I have no idea if I'm being used. I'm asking you, Senator, should each and every Minnesotan pick up the phone this week and call Department of Human Services and see if anyone has used my name to get any services whatsoever? Because I can tell you I haven't applied. That would put such a weight on I'm not calling for it. But out Erna's in this now. Erna's in the middle of a fraud case she knows nothing about, going to have to hire a lawyer. Do we have to get proactive as Minnesotans until I get an Office of Inspector General in? You know what I'm saying? Well, what else can you do?
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a really good point, because some of the people who don't like the OIG bill, a lot of the arguments we hear is this is redundant. We already do this. We don't need this. The duplicate, it's duplicative.
Duplicitous,
I hear that all the time too. And then you see this and you're like, talking about Irma, clearly there are not enough people in the fight. And clearly keeping all of our solutions on fraud internal isn't working either. So I don't think it's bad. And if there is some redundancy until interagency agreements are worked out or conversations are had or investigations are handed over, whatever, that's fine. I don't see how that's a bad thing if it means that we get a handle on this really significant problem.
I think this comes down to leadership at the top. At some point, we need someone who comes in, Democrat or Republican, and you go to Human Services and you go to this one, you go to that one, you say, guess what? You're working together. It's all on computers. Share your files. I want to know every human that's getting multiple stuff from us. Just have a list. Right. And if her name happens to be Erna Hammerschmidt, we'll find out.
Right. But to your point, I will call out the Republicans a little bit here too. Everybody runs on fraud. I'm going to fight fraud. I'm going to fight fraud. All of these auditors now are like I'm going to do this. One, that's not the auditor's job. And in order for you to change what a constitutional office is, you're going to have to go through the legislature. That's not happening, but whatever. Let him do his thing. My point is that like everybody's talking about running on fraud. I see Lisa Damuth do it. I see Kristen Robbins do it. And I think it's great because it is a problem and we should all join together to fight it. However, when you ask, how do you want to do that? Very few substantial answers ever come out because it's a complicated issue. There isn't one thing that's going to solve all of it. Even my bill, which I love and I fight for all the time, is going to solve some of the problems. I would argue a lot of the problems, but it's not going to solve all of them because it's complicated. And so you can't just run on fraud and say you're going to fight fraud. Like it's just the boogeyman. You have to have a plan. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to have a substantial argument over what it is that you're going to do on day one. Instead, it's just this,
100% agree.
like, it's
It's easy. Fraud is a bumper sticker
slogan for
works.
everybody.
Yeah, fraud on a bumper sticker works. Everybody hates us. Now you're on my side. I tell you what, I would get in. First thing I'd do is I would make sure that people are held accountable from the person writing the check, the person who oversees the program, the ultimate commissioner in charge of it, from top to bottom. If I find out you even thought about it and you didn't bring it up, then we're going to have problems. Because as far as I can tell, and this really drives me crazy, no one's even got a letter of reprimand in their file with all this money going out. And I can't imagine, as smart as our people are that work for us, somebody didn't have an inkling that there might be some issues. And I would fix it there. I'm so out of time. I do love having, I love having you on. I want you on as often as possible because I think you're going to be in the mix of all of this in the next year. Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Heather Gustafson.